ties the 60, 70, and 80 into what we're talking about tonight, because it sort of weaves itself through all of this. Any place you look up Scottish beers, you see things like Scottish Light or Scottish Heavy, but you may also see 60 and 70 shilling, which would be the equivalents of those. And today, they wouldn't even cost 60 and 70 shilling. They'd cost a whole lot more. But back in the day, that's what they cost. So they still carry that nomenclature. All right, so category 14 is the overall category for the Scottish Light, Scottish Heavy, and Scottish Export. This is out of the style guide, so this is how they introduce the overall style or category. The overall meaning of shilling ales have been described incorrectly for years. A single style of beer was never designated as 60, 70, or 80. The shillings only referred to the cost of the barrel of beer, meaning that there were 54 stouts and 86 shilling IPAs, and so on. The Scottish ales in question were termed light, heavy, and export, which cover the spectrum of costs from around 60 to 90 shillings, and simply dark malt-focused ales. The larger 120 shilling ales fall outside of the purview of this category. That's the category 17C, is where the wee heavy actually exists, and the heavy in the big British beers fall outside the purview of this category, as well as the strongest Scotch ales, also known as wee heavy. The Scottish Light, Heavy, and Export guidelines read nearly the same for each style of beer. As the gravity increases, so does the character of the beer in question. When we get into the comparing the stats on them, pretty much the only thing that changes is the ABV from one to the next. Historically, the three types of beer were party-guiled to different strengths and represented an adaptation of English pale ales, but with reduced strengths and hopping rates and darker colors, often with added caramel. More modern versions, post-World War II at least, tended to use more complex grists. So party guile being they would brew one big beer, they would then pull off the first runnings of that, and that would be, might be a wee heavy, or it might be the export here, and then they would go through and pull another running off, and that would be maybe the 60 or 70 shillings. So they get more than one batch of beer, one size of beer out of a single grist that they had mashed. All right, so the lowest strength beer is the Scottish Light. That's category 14A, and you can see here the McEwen actually uses the 60 shilling in the name and the labeling of the beer. The overall impression, and what I've done is I've taken the style guide and just kind of each one of these, I put one portion of the sections of the style guide, because with very little exception, I mean, there are little exceptions, but very little difference between them, other than it just gets a little, the beers get a little bigger and a little more character as you move up the line. So the overall impression, and this was taken from the Scottish Light, but if you go to the Scottish Heavy, I think with the exception of the last couple of sentences here, it will be word for word the same. A malt-focused, generally caramelly beer with perhaps a few esters and occasionally a butterscotch aftertaste. Hops only to balance and support the malt. The malt character can range from dry and grainy to rich, toasty, and caramelly, but is never roasty and especially never has a peat smoke character. Traditionally, the darkest of the Scottish ales, sometimes nearly black. Based on the spec, I don't see how it could be black, but lacking any burnt, overtly roasted character. Now, it is true that the Scottish Light, the low end of its color, is higher than the heavy and the export, and I believe also the wee heavy. So while they almost completely overlap, the low end of the color spectrum for the 60 is higher than the others. Okay, so the Scottish Heavy being the next one. Okay, and here again, it's the labeling for McEwen's, and the tap handle there are using the 70 shilling. The alcohol on this one is 3.7. Let's go back up to the other one. The tap handle shows 3.2 for the light, and for the heavy being 3.7. We're not talking about huge differences here until you get to the export, which has a pretty wide range, and then the wee heavy, of course, which is completely, considerably bigger. So on the heavy, or the 70 shilling, as it's sometimes referred to, is the aroma low to medium maltness, often with flavors of toasted breadcrumbs, ladyfingers, and English biscuits. Low to medium caramel and low butterscotch is allowable. Light pome fruitiness is in best examples. May have low traditional English hop aroma, earthy, floral, orange, citrus, spicy, etc. Peat smoke is inappropriate, as it is in all of these. The appearance is pale copper to very dark brown. It should be very clear, low to moderate, creamy, off-white head.
Does anybody know if these McEwen's, these small McEwen's, are still made?
I don't. Well, I went out to McEwen's website, and they're all still listed there.
They're probably tap only.
They show the full. They show what I assume is still the current range of beers. And it had these, okay. Plus it had some other ones. So they've got one that's called Best Scotch, I think it is, and I mean there's some others in there that are still almost hard to tell the difference between one and the next one. They actually have a lager listed out there in their lineup.
Martin, I've never seen them in the U.S. The only McEwen's I've seen is the wee heavy, and it is hard to find as well.
Probably because they're such small beers don't travel well.
Yeah, I mean that's the case with most like British beers, right? The small ones don't travel, don't get bottled.
Mm-hmm.
And those lagers, I would imagine it's like British lagers, which most of the lagers aren't made with lager yeast. Lager is more of a marketing term in the UK, and I suspect it would be the case with McEwen's as well.
Okay. It refers to butterscotch in here being, so it's one of the beers where DMS is not at the appropriate levels, is not a fault.
No, that would be diacetyl.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. Yes, diacetyl, and it is it is where I finally figured out diacetyl. I mean, took a beer and I drank it, and I said, that's what everybody's talking about is diacetyl, and it was very definitely in there. So, but it's one of those. I don't, I couldn't say across all the styles, but it's certainly one of the styles where it is allowed to be the most prominent of the styles as far as how much diacetyl is allowable. I mean, again, you don't want it overtaking the flavor of the beer, but it is an okay to have diacetyl in this beer.
Diacetyl should never be in any beer except Czech beers, Scottish beers, English beers, and a few others. That was my joke for the night.
Okay.
Let's say Andrew beers.
It should never be in any beer except for all of those beers that it's in and allowable. We make too big a deal out of diacetyl. Get over it. It's not that big a deal.
I've been finding diacetyl in a lot of red wines lately.
Oh my.
It's weird,
Yeah.
but
It's there for sure.
Buttery
That's what I like.
Chardonnays.
that
Todd,
too. Yeah,
Todd,
you're right.
Todd brought me a can of this Taze River, our local bistro there on the southeast side, East Highlands Scottish Ale, 5.1 ABV and 26 IBUs. It fits into the 14C parameters in those two, and I think the color is too. It's got an odd level of diacetyl that is so slick. My tongue is still slick, and I had the last swallow 5 minutes ago. And the flavors are mostly appropriate, but they don't blend well. It's just very odd beer.
Due to the diacetyl, maybe?
There is diacetyl, definitely diacetyl, and enough to make it just slimy.
I mean, you got to keep in mind, though, there's a lot of caramel malts in these. You get a lot of toffee and things like that. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to separate out.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, if you've done that off flavors kit, you put a little diacetyl in whatever you're using as your base beer, and you can taste it. And you put a little bit of DMS, and you taste it. And you put a little bit of smoke, and you taste it. And then you put all three together, and it's like, what the? I can't pick them apart, depending on the combinations. They're much harder to pick apart. People like Sandy with exquisite palates, which is not Linda, can pick them apart much better or smell them.
Yeah, Martin.
This is certainly a style where you have to look for the mouthfeel because of the toffee and caramel and sweetness that's in there in the beer anyway. It could easily get confused with diacetyl. So in these types of beers, you definitely have to look for that mouthfeel.
Yeah, Martin, we both found the local beers in Lafayette that are Scottish style. So we got one from Taze and one from Escape Velocity. So we did exactly what you said. We just distributed earlier before the meeting. So good idea.
Escape Velocity. No, that was Taze. Okay.
Yeah, Escape Velocity is in the growler, Linda. The can is Taze. So interesting.
What are people's thoughts on whether these beers tend to be better as all grain or with whatchamacallit, invert, sugar additions? Thoughts? Andrew,
well, historically there were all kinds of adjuncts used in the Scottish ales. Corn grits is one of them.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe my my mild has a bit of corn in it, but yeah.
These beers they're much lighter in body and general character than most people tend to think they are. Many times homebrewed and commercial examples of these beers are too heavy and too sweet. So using some simple sugars would probably help get a lighter body and not so sweet, authentic version, perhaps. But it's really hard judging these styles because it's kind of like Doppelbocks. So many of them are so sweet, and these beers in competitions and such, they tend to be too heavy and too sweet than the authentic examples.
Well, and water plays a big part in this. And a lot of people look at this, this is a big malt-focused beer, so therefore I want just nothing but chlorides. I don't want any sulfate at all. And that's the whole misnomer of assuming that chloride equals malty, which it does not. Chloride equals full mouthfeel.
Yeah. Yes.
You don't necessarily want too much of.
Yep.
But sulfate is that drying influence. And back in the day when they were drawing the groundwater from around Edinburgh, that groundwater did have a decent amount of sulfate, nowhere near Burton kind of level, but, 50, 60, 70 parts per million. And that definitely helps dry the finish on these beers. And even though they're big and malty or even small and malty, they are not bitter because of that sulfate. But they finish much drier.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can get Bellhaven. You can get Bellhaven, which is an 80, or around here pretty regularly, pretty easily. And I tell you, people, especially judges, they need to calibrate on that beer a couple times a year at least.
Or every day.
But that when you drink that beer, it's much lighter in body. It's not near as sweet than what most people tend to make these beers. So you end up in competitions judging. Unfortunately, you end up judging sort of this Americanized notion of what the style is. And often when I try to say, man, this is nothing like Bellhaven, which is a classic example that we should all be drinking to calibrate for the style. Usually, often none in the flight are even close to it. So it ends up being the best of the Americanized versions as opposed to authentic versions, which I don't understand, because that beer is readily available and people should be able to drink it and calibrate to it.
Hey, Martin, back to your water chemistry comments. So based on what you're saying, can you have a decent amount of chloride, decent amount of sulfate, and have a full-bodied yet reasonably dry presenting beer?
Yeah, and in both cases, it's not going to be a whole lot of chloride or sulfate in the water. In that, say, 50 to 70 parts per million range. If I'm not mistaken, I think that the Edinburgh profile that's in Brew and Water, I dug that out of historic research, and I think that will help. But and by the way, sulfate additions can be done post fermentation. So if you end up with a beer that's too damn, it just coats your mouth and you're just like chewing it, and it just doesn't go away, add some gypsum to a glass, a thin pinch, and see what that does for you. More than likely, it's going to help dry it out and, make it a little more balanced. It's magic.
Yep.
So what's the FG on a export? Have we gotten to that yet?
We haven't gotten to it, but it'll be, we sneak down to the last slide here. This is not responding. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll get there at the end. What it is that I didn't have that slide. I had the slide in the PowerPoint, but it was told to hide itself last month, and I guess I didn't make it unhide, so it didn't go into my PDF. I made a PDF. So we'll get there. The one you're asking about was what, export?
Yeah, and actually, I think I was asking about a wee heavy is what I meant, and that's 18 to 40, surprisingly.
On the wee heavy or the export?
Yeah, wee heavy. So anyway, sorry, I'm getting off track. Continue.
Okay. Let's see. So now we're up to category, subcategory 14C, which is the export, and 80, and sometimes, there seems to be there doesn't seem to be good consistency of 80 versus 90. Other than there's some out there that are labeled 90. I've got an image here of a 90 that says "we heavy," although from the other part of the stale guide it says that really those would not be 90; they'd be more 120 to one. But 80 is McEwen's refers to theirs as an 80 shilling. Flavor entirely malt focused, with flavors ranging from pale bready malt with caramel overtones to rich toasty malt with roasted accents, but never roasty, or a combination thereof. Fruity esters are not required, but add depth, yet are never high. Hop bitterness to balance the malt. No to low hop flavor is also allowed and should be traditional English character, so earthy, floral, orange, citrus, spicy, etc. Finish ranges from rich and malty to dry and grainy.
Can we just hold? One of the things that surprised me the other year or a few ago, that East Kent Golding is reputed to have sometimes orangey, citrusy notes. I've never picked that up. But then again, I'm sure that we don't get the best EKG here. But has anyone ever noted that?
No.
Yes. It used to be years ago. It was more citrusy, I think, than it is today.
What, Ron? What do you figure that's attributed to?
I have no idea.
But it is interesting that that existed.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember specifically one meeting. It was English ales. It was an FBI meeting many years ago, and everyone had used EKG, and a bunch of them were citrusy. And it was pretty crazy. So that was the first time I remember having a real good discussion about it. But then after that, looking for it, and it could be found much more readily than today. But I think it still pops up today in beers as a light citrusy note.
I wonder if those cynical side of me wonders if back in the day the English would give us all their really citrusy ones.
Yeah,
like
maybe.
Americans won't notice.
Yeah, maybe.
But now that they're brewing with Amarillo and everything else, that's in everybody's freezers over there, even at Fuller's and things like that. Now they probably keep them for themselves.
And I'm sure we do the same with our Cascade.
Give them the crap Cascade.
Yeah.
I do love some good.
They get the earthy shit. We keep the grapefruity stuff over here.
It's like they won't even know it's earthy. They're steeped in it.
Yeah. Steeped in it. Ha, ha. That was a little hop joke. Hey, this is interesting. You've got McEwen's export in the bottle, and on it says 4.5%. And is this supposed to be the same thing then? The McEwen's 80, but it says 4.2%. And the other thing I found interesting was it says the famous heavy at 4.2%.
Right. Yes. I mean, that's where I said there's a lot of inconsistency on where people seem to draw the line. The tap handle is right off McEwen's site. The bottle, I believe, is also out on their site as well. Scottish Heavy.
It's common for the bottled versions to have higher alcohol levels for most British beers. I mean, Fuller's is a prime example. A London Pride on tap is lower gravity than a London Pride in a bottle.
Is that
Well,
just
a lot of the Belgian beers do that because of the bottle conditioning.
Yeah, that's what I was.
And it raises considerably sometimes But
So some of it might be that, but I've got pictures from being in Fuller's, and they're on their, like, in their control room on their screen. On one side, they had a batch of that was going to be bottled, and I forget what they call it, but it had a different name than the batch that was for draft, and they had different ABVs.
Yeah, so that would just mean they're just literally making different beers for the different purposes.
It's almost like an export Helles or something like that. If it's going in a bottle, it may be traveling, and so we're going to bump it up and
Uh-huh.
public travel
Both of those,
or something.
Interesting.
both 4.2 and the ABV for an export is 3.9 to 6. So it's a fairly wide range on that compared to the others. The heavy only goes up to 3.9. So they're both relatively small export based on the style guide, where the style guide drew its, made its lines between the different ones. But yes, I mean, there's places in here where the 80 is referred. You see something that's called itself an 80, and then it also says it's a heavy. But that's not consistent with the style guide, at least where it's at today. So finish
Well,
ranges
we always have to remember that the BJCP style guidelines are our interpretation and trying to summarize and create, in some cases, these styles, which means it doesn't always match reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I didn't go back and look at 2008 to see whether or not these shifted at all between the prior style guide and this style guide. Like,
They probably did.
so it's.
I make another comment. I think it's interesting that on all of these, they specifically mention that peat smoke is inappropriate, whereas I think it should say smoke is inappropriate.
Well,
that's going way back to the time when we thought these beers were smoky, and they're not. We know what it is now, and there should be no smoked malt in these beers.
agreed. And that peat smoke thing is, people are saying, oh, Scotch, so therefore let's get the peat in there, and
and
terrible.
I've tried to tell homebrew shops, if they're selling peat smoked malt, please put a giant sign on it that says this is only to be used for making whiskey.
Yeah.
Do not use peat smoke malt in beer.
Now, Ron, actually, Joe brewed a Scottish beer probably a decade ago, and there were no smoked malts in there at all, and yet the yeast did throw a very light smoky phenol in there.
Sure it wasn't medicinal?
No, definitely not.
There's a fine line between smoke phenol and medicinal phenol, and at low levels, it's hard to tell the difference.
Well, that's possible. You'll have to take that up with Mr. Werner.
Joe, do you still have some of that beer left over?
Only 2 kegs, down to 2 kegs.
Yeah, you get the keg if you drink it.
I agree about that fine line between medicinal and smoke, but when you cross that fine line, there's no question about it, and there ain't no going back.
Yeah.
Actually, we could talk about this for days. There is crossing the line, and it has to do with everything from your body chemistry to what you've eaten in the last couple of days to your sinuses, and you could perceive it as smoky one moment and medicinal the next. And as a lover of smoked beers and someone who has thought a lot about this and drank a lot of these beers and gone back to them in many different ways and talked to people and led classes where someone will say, that tastes like, that's Band-Aids. And I'm like, no, that's great smoke, and it's just, dude, it is all over the place. It is one of the hardest things to nail down, is the perception of smoke versus medicinal.
Agreed.
It's hard as hell. Even a beer yourself, you could drink a beer. Now, Schlenkerla to me is almost always good, clean smoke. Almost always. But if you get the Helles version that has a faint hint of smoke in it, that beer sometimes to me tastes like good smoke, and other times it tastes like chloroseptic. And I think it has to do with the amount of smoke and me and what I've done the last couple days and what I've drank, what I've eaten.
I think there's also an oxidation component there.
Oxidation, yes. All of that comes into play. Hell, I remember I made a smoked beer once, and one day I would drink it and go, damn, that is really good. And the next day I would go pour a glass and it's like, damn it, that tastes like chloroseptic. It's just,
yeah,
it's tough, man. It's a tough one. It's way harder than what most people understand it to be.
Yeah, and it's day to day, because it probably got good again, and you said, well, why did I think that it was bad? But
that is exactly what happened.
Yeah, you might have. I'm thinking maybe it's frame of mind, whatever you ate previously.
Yeah, I think it's stronger than frame of mind. I think it does come down to things you've eaten and drank prior, and medications affect the way that we perceive aromas even. So, I mean, it's crazy. If I've got a class of 30 students and I pour them a smoky beer and, a fourth of the class thinks it's chloroseptic, and these are students, they don't know anything about any of these things. All they know is basic stuff. And it's like, wow, that's like chloroseptic. And the other half of the class is saying, no, it's like campfire.
Yeah, campfire.
And they're tasting the same beer at the same exact time. So it's tricky.
Yeah, agreed.
Anyway,
Okay.
I think it should anyway. That should say no smoke is appropriate, and
Okay.
we all know now that what we perceive as smokiness is a hint of an ashy character from the small use of roasted barley and a little pinch of black malt, and when you use those in such small proportions, that's about all you end up with, is this hint of a earthy, ashy smokiness in the finish of the beer.
I agree.
Not smoke.
A hint of smoke, maybe.
Yep.
Okay, on the mouthfeel, this is specifically on the export, but they're all in the same realm. Medium low to medium body, low to moderate carbonation, can be relatively rich and creamy to dry and grainy.
And again, that water issue hits it.
So going back to Ron, we shouldn't be using any black malt in these beers. So we shouldn't be getting that texture or that profile in these beers.
Bellhaven? Yeah, Bellhaven uses a little black malt.
Yeah, probably just for coloring, right?
And to dry out the finish.
Oh, they do? Okay.
Yeah.
Like I'm just reading here, it says that amber, brown, crystal, wheat, roasted, dark, sugars, but I don't see black malts in there. That's why I'm asking. I get a stout, but
I thought the
you drop
guidelines were changed. I thought the guidelines were changed, and it said some dark malts could be used for added color and dryness. Is it not in there?
Here it says amber and brown crystal wheat for the 14C.
Yes, it does say that you can add those very roasted things for color, not for roasty flavor. Under ingredients in the guidelines.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
And I would agree with that. You're not trying to make a porter. You're not trying to add roasty flavors. But at that small percentage that you're putting them in there, they do come through as an ashy dryness in the finish. There's a hint of roast on the exhale. But it's not a strong characteristic of the beer. That should actually be noted in the guidelines. Again, if you haven't tasted a Bellhaven in a while, go get one. Very distinct, earthy, ashy, lightly smoky character, a hint on the exhale. I mean, it's more than a hint. It's easily recognizable, but it's just sort of there after you swallow it on the exhale. It's not in the mid palate. It's not in the main flavor. It's just right there in the finish.
Okay.
And, you know, I was one of the people that first identified this misconception we had within the BJCP and in this style. And I ended up having a wonderful, long email exchange with the brewer, directly with the brewer of Bellhaven. And he was the one that told me they use both roasted barley and black malt in this beer, and specifically why they did it. And it was to help dry out the finish and for color. Uh-oh, what happened?
I was trying to get the PowerPoint here. It will be back in just a second.
And I told him, you know, in the BJCP, we thought it was smoky, and that's how we listed it. And he said he always found that amusing, and that internally they referred to it as nutty and ashy, but not smoky.
Good to know.
I sent all of those
just
notes. All of that conversation was sent to Gordon Strong, and that was the foundation for the new guidelines write-up. But I was not actually involved in the writing of these guidelines.
Probably Chris England.
Probably Chris England.
My favorite person.
All right.
Out a few swear words combined in just to make it authentic.
Hey, you gotta say my fucking favorite person.
And you gotta say it really fast.
Fuck, fuck, fuck a few more times. But who here would like to see Chris England and Martin Brugard go at it?
Oh, front row seats, baby.
Oh, come on! He'll eat my shorts.
I think we're voting for it.
It depends on the format, Martin. If it's like fast talk debate style, you will get killed. But you know, there's another format. You know, you could add the debate via Excel and probably kick his ass.
It would have to be. It would definitely have to be moderated
with the mute button.
But he's a doctor.
I'm kind of picturing that first Trump debate, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Anyway,
All right. So the Wee Heavy, which I threw that in here, technically it's in the strong British ale category. And so it's 17C, category 17, substyle C. And here again, the discrepancy of what is a what's a wee heavy, what's a wee heavy, what's a 90 shilling. Bellhaven's Wee Heavy says 90 shilling on the bottle, and it is 7.4%, so very low end. I mean, it's low end, but it is bigger than an export. An export stops at 6%. That's the bottle says 7.4%. The McEwen says 8%.
yeah.
The style itself can go up to 10%, according to the style guide. 6.5 to 10%. So with this has 90 shilling on it, sort of putting it in that sequence of 70, 80, 60, 70, 80, 90, where Wee Heavy is kind of dubbed in as the at that point. But the header that we read a little bit ago of the style guide seems to make it sound like that it would be at least 120 shilling back in the day, and not 90 shilling. So anyway, let me give you I'm going to read just the overall impression, because Wee Heavy does
101 shilling bottled in bond version.
101
Or 100 shilling bottled in bond.
Yeah, 100 shilling.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And
Sorry.
these are, assume these are would have to be up for current day rates. That these are probably back in the 1800s.
Yeah, I wonder what 90 shilling is today.
Right.
That they $150 Wee Heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever.
Right. So the overall impression of a Wee Heavy in the style guide: rich, malty, dextrinous, and usually caramel sweet. These beers can give an impression that is suggestive of a dessert. Complex secondary malt and alcohol flavors prevent a one-dimensional quality. Strength and maltiness can vary, but should not be cloying or syrupy. So aroma is deeply malty with a strong caramel component. Lightly smoky secondary aromas may be present, adding complexity. Peat, it says again here, peat smoke is inappropriate. Diacetyls should be low to none. Low to moderate esters and alcohol are often present in stronger versions. Hops are very low to none and can be earthy or floral. So the comments from the style guide are shown here. Also known as strong Scotch ale, the term Wee Heavy means small, strong, and traces to the beer that made the term famous, Fowler's Wee Heavy, a 12 guinea ale. Now, is a guinea related to a shilling? Would that be 10 times a shilling?
It's the English system, so nothing's 10 times anything.
Okay. Doesn't work that way.
They 8.2 times.
I mean, you would think it'd all be nicely lined up because the metric system's lined up. You'd think they would have carried that over into currency. So.
That's why they had to go to the
part of the problem is Britain had an old currency system before the one they have now.
Mm-hmm.
They only moved to the one they had.
It was
like 1970 or something. It wasn't that long ago.
I want to say a guinea was 20 shillings, but I think it might have varied. I don't know. I don't think they use it anymore.
I mean, the euro I would think would come into play there, and that would be like the
No.
1970 type.
According to the Google, a guinea is 21 shillings.
21 shillings.
My bad.
You can't use the euro either.
12
I've
times
been getting ripped
21.
off then.
A guinea is 1 pound in 1 shilling.
So that would make it a 252 shilling beer.
So it's a
So that's
buck
pretty
five,
expensive.
$1.05.
Just looking for
Pound
that
five.
420 shilling.
So compared to you can see where the light and the heavy would have were kind of the economy versions.
It was minted in Kingdom of England 1663 to 1813.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that. But yeah, try to make change for a pound, 1.05 pounds. That sounds lordy.
Well, they also did a thing where they like half-heartedly went to the metric system, and that's when they invented pence. Not Mike Pence, but
Mike
pennies.
Pence.
Basically
It was a
pennies, a
different-
1/100th of a pound. And I want to say that's when the shilling and the guinea and the crown and all those weird things went away, and you just had pounds and pence. But surely somebody on the call knows better than I do.
Sounds like a CIA session there, Andrew.
Hey, to get back to the beer for a second and away from
Currency
historical
exchange.
currency.
Whatever.
I've always been a little bothered by the term, by the phrase that they use on these beers to keep them from being one-dimensional, the caramel notes from being one-dimensional. And I've always actually thought these beers are fairly one-dimensional. I mean, when it comes to caramely beers, a Doppelbock is multi-dimensional. A wee heavy is pretty singularly kettle caramelized caramel. And sure, you're going to throw a little toffee and some notes like that in there, but it's not like multi-dimensional like Munich malt and decoction mashed, and it doesn't have that kind of depth and complexity. It's actually a pretty single note kettle caramelized caramel. And that's what it should be. That's all that's in there, and that's all it is. So it is a one note caramel thing. Anyway, McEwen's, I had just mentioned that it's hard to find, but recently I believe I have seen McEwen's Scotch Ale at both the new Total Wine store and at Vine and Table. So there is some of the McEwen Scotch Ale floating around out there right now. Skull Splitter is out there a little bit these days as well. But if you recall, we stopped getting it for a while, several years, and then it came back, and it was a new package, and I don't think that beer ever tasted the same. I think it went through some changes at that time, so I'm not a big fan of Skull Splitter anymore. It used to be a great example, but the McEwen's is certainly wonderful, and there is some available. If you're interested in this style, I would buy some now because I don't see it that often. So obviously we've gotten a shipment in, and it may go away, and we may not see it for another couple of years. Just a thought.
Mm-hmm. So the Wee Heavy is historically the strongest beer from a Scottish ale party guile, which we described earlier. And really any one of the other beers could be made off of the potentially made off of the second runnings of the Wee Heavy, especially the 60 and the 70. History more related to historical brews than modern lower strength Scottish ales. These beers have their roots in the strong ales of the 1700s and 1800s. Although formulations and methods have changed, a premium product often produced for export. Modern versions have lower starting and finishing gravities than their historical ancestors. And both of these are, relatively on the low end of the style, the lower half of the style anyway, as far as ABV is concerned. So then here's the stats of all four styles, so you can see kind of how they stack up. Original gravity and ABV being the biggest influencers for what's changing from style to style. So one picks up for the next
ABV
one.
range for Scottish heavy, right?
Yes, I believe. Let me look at it here.
Or did they get switched?
Yeah, I must have typed in the wrong column. Right. Yes, I typed the wrong column. Yes, those two are switched. Should be 2.5 to 3.2 on the light and 3.2 on the.
But there seems to be no overlap. So in essence, when you get to, 3.2%, you're switching over to heavy. And then when you get to 3.9%, you get to export. And then, greater than 6.5%, we heavy.
I think this is challenging then if you're going to be judging the Scottish light versus the Scottish heavy, that they're so close. If you go right down the borderline, was it this or is it that? I think it'd be very difficult to tell.
Oh, no. If it's 3.3 and they said it was a heavy, you ding the shit out of them.
Well, no, but if somebody's at 3.2, if somebody's at 3.2,
3.3 is a heavy.
Well, no, 3.2 could be a Scottish light. If you reverse it.
Did I say that wrong?
Yeah,
I was being.
I know you're being
idiot.
Snarky.
I like to brew mine at 3.7, and just to confuse people. Not really.
Great.
All of those are small. So telling the difference between any of those smaller ones is going to be pretty dang difficult.
Well, it looked like they were mostly session beers from the Scottish side. That's what I interpret that as. That's the Scottish beer that they just sit and drink in the pub all night.
Right. Except, the bigger one has a pretty broad range, right? It can actually go up to a reasonable strength, but the two smaller ones, they're definitely quite small beers.
Right. And even if you go on the lighter side of the heavy, the heavy, the exports are still pretty much a session beer. You're drinking a 4% beer or 4.5% beer.
So I got my first wee heavy. I think I brewed it last winter, and it's tasting pretty good. It's 7.4% finished. I was trying to be inspired by Nathan Compton, who brews a lot of these and does well with them, and mine fermented way more down than him. So it looks like style guidelines are 1018 to 1040 FG. So I'm right at the bottom end, which suits my preference, but I don't know how it would judge the result when you put it up against some other ones.
Is it dried in because it's on the lower side? Did you dry it out?
It's I wouldn't want it any sweeter. I think it's about 1019 or 1.019, whatever.
Send some up here. I'll fill out a square sheet.
Thanks, Linda. Which, sort of basically, I should have, if I didn't have to go to the pain of bottling one, if I could just, send you guys beer, because I got nobody else drinking it. Finding 5 gallons will last you more than a long freaking time.
You don't have enough growlers just to fill one up and say, bring me a clean one?
Yeah, probably. Need to get a beer exchange going or something. I don't know. I've actually got, I went into big keg washing mode. I'm changing topics, I know, but I think I've got 28 empty kegs at the moment. So,
Holy damn.
yeah, like inventory is low, man. It's scraping the bottom of the barrel, whatever, literally.
Hey, what? Since you changed the topic and you were on the topic of giving away beer, did some of you may have seen the post by the guy yesterday in German Brewing, where everyone's doing their Advent beer calendars right now, and what his club did was everybody brewed and then bottled a beer and had it ready for a certain time, and then they all got together and they put together an Advent calendar.
Oh, that's a fantastic idea.
Isn't that a great idea?
Yeah,
Great idea.
One of my Costco Advent calendar. It's actually worse this year because Belinda has a Meyer wine calendar, so she's on a wine call right now to everybody else who had the wine Advent calendar.
Ah.
Oh, interesting.
It's not.
Anyway, that's something whoever's in charge of those activities for the club should maybe jot that one down and consider organizing something like that. I mean, how long is Advent? Is it, 24 days, right?
Yep, started yesterday.
Conveniently.
So,
Match made in heaven.
24 days. You just need at least 24 people to make a beer. 24 people make 24 beers.
Hey, great idea.
Whatever number we want. We'll call it Badvent.
Exactly. Who's to say you can't
And we'll
have
do
more
it in
than one
February.
beer or per day?
I did see the, I think it was in the German beer group too. I didn't see that one, Ron, which I love that idea, but it was like I think it was a cartoon of a dude who just like took a case of beer and like nailed it to his wall.
Yeah.
It's like pulling one out, like, December 1st, pull this one out.
That's a very, very boring Advent calendar, but
Yeah, it's better than no beer Advent calendar.
yeah, I suppose.
Hey, Ron, you'd appreciate this. We're doing a whiskey Advent calendar in our local
Cool.
whiskey group.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Oh, I'm switching. Switching.
Yeah, we all donate a bottle, and someone buys little tastings, and we separate them out. So.
Yep.
I saw a calendar like that at Meyer. It's just like little bottles, but
For whiskey?
pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah, my wife and kids, I think it was 3 years back, actually, they made me an Advent calendar. So they went to like
I remember that.
bought a dozen beers. Kids like colored little pictures to go on the top of each of them, so you couldn't like see what the beer was until you pulled it out. It was quite the gift.
Anyone looking for singles of beers, probably the best place to buy singles is Cons. If you haven't been in there in a while, Cons on Keystone. They bust up cases and six packs and have a tremendous display of singles.
Yeah, but it's all the way in the back, and like nobody goes back there.
No. You're talking about the cooler of
Oh,
singles.
you're talking about something else?
I'm talking about that whole row in front of the
Yeah.
coolers.
Oh, yeah.
It's a
whole
row in front of
entire
the cooler.
row is mostly singles. So, and then in the back, there's like those are when it gets down to only one or two left of something for whatever reason. It seems like they put it in that cooler, but yeah, those are singles too. So great way to put an Advent calendar together. Maybe I'll do that. Build my own.
Behind the table, you can, they, at least for, unless they changed things recently, you could buy singles of anything.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can pull a bottle out of any one of their packs there and buy that.
There's a place up in Walker County that they've been doing that for years. The Chalet. There's a chain of package stores up there that, with rare exception, you could take one out of a 4-pack, and their cash register system was all set up to just charge you a quarter of the 4-pack plus 9% or whatever. It was kicked up a little bit, but it was wonderful to be able to.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
10 years ago, I found that.
Isn't Party Pack like that?
Yeah, the 96th Street. Yeah, 96th Street Party Pack does the same. You can be single beers all over the place.
Yeah.
It's surprising how many of them do. They just don't tell you. But I mean, you can go to Big Red and some of the Big Reds, and the others will do the same thing. Not for necessarily everything, but at least some of the inventory that they've got there.
Yeah.
You can't get Bourbon County in mix of sixes.
Hey, Big Red Liquors at Fall Creek has a KBS Singleton, so I mean, do that if you want.
Could I get a single of Bud Light?
A
Single case, yes. You can get a single case, yes.
They're
You
called
get
40s,
Bourbon
and they
County
make a lot of
Budweiser.
them.
They call
Just,
it the 32-ounce jobs.
One more item on the style topic. Just want to plug Ron Pattinson, and he's written several books on British beers, and his beers on Scottish ales, or his books on Scottish ales, and his website, shutupaboutbarclayperkins.com, is a great reference. And this is a really thick book, by the way. It's about 450 pages, and most of it's recipes.
I picked that up too. Yeah, it's
And
mostly
they're
recipes.
it is mostly recipes, and they're very surprising. Like he comes up with surprising sort of, he goes back through historical logs from pro breweries, and he comes up with some surprising findings, like the Scottish weren't afraid to use hops. The myth is that Scottish beers weren't heavily hopped because they had to import all their hops. But he shows that, no, actually they were growing hops in Scotland, and they used them, just like any other, just like the English bitters, they made bitters in Scotland too. It's just not maybe what they're known for. And that's why this myth has sort of persisted. I hinted at this earlier, but they used adjuncts in their beers too, most notably corn grits, not flaked maize. So they used the actual grits, and they did a cereal mash and all that work because they thought it was worth it, because that's an expensive thing to do, to take raw grits and do a cereal mash and everything. And I made a beer like that, actually, from recipe with corn grits, and it was kind of a pain. You got to do the cereal mash, and then end up getting a stuck mash, and so I had to add rice hulls. I had to refloat the grain bed a couple of times, add rice hulls. But it's pretty good beer. It did well in Brewers Cup.
Andrew,
but there's all kinds of interesting recipes in here and insights.
Which book is it in?
So this one is Scotland Volume 2.
I've got that one.
Which
that's the one we all bought when he was here, right?
Yeah, right.
He visited. It's signed. Visited at the Broad Ripple Brew Pub.
What's the author's name again, Andrew?
It's Ron Pattinson.
But in his blog is Shut Up About Barclay Perkins. I think he said that. Right.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you got to get past the tone. I mean, he's definitely got a tone of like everybody's an idiot.
It's a Chris England.
the BJCP are idiots, like that. You've got to get past.
And he's not German.
He's
not German.
Well, he was working with Chris England to test out some of these recipes, so that's got to tell you something out there.
Yep.
That's funny.
He's in a pod.
Yeah, but
Andrew,
if you can get past all that, there's a lot of really valuable nuggets of wisdom in there. Just from, I mean, nobody's gone through as many brewing records in Great Britain as he has. I'm quite sure of that. So,
Andrew, regarding the grits, were they de-oiled, made into grits, as opposed to raw corn that's just been pulverized?
no, well, so I don't know historically, but I mean, when I did it, I just used polenta.
Yeah,
But,
I would think it would be like whatever homogenized or whatever definition of a grit is.
Yeah, exactly. Because the
It's
thing
grits. Yeah.
grits what you do with grits is you soak them in lye, and they or lime, lime, and
No, I don't think it's nixtamalized corn.
Yeah, nixtamalization is not required to call it grits. I always thought that was true, and then I found out, nope, grits doesn't have a narrow definition. You can call
but
it.
the good thing about grits is true grits that have been saponified.
Nixtamalized?
The oil is gone and they no longer can be turned rancid.
You mean
regular corn
nixtamalized? Nixtamalized is the word for that. They don't.
That's great.
Yeah.
I don't think it's. I don't think we're talking about nixtamalized corn.
I sort of doubt it too, Martin, just because, despite what Andrew was saying, I mean, these do lend a certain character to beers. I've struggled with getting my mind wrapped around that, but tasting enough, I think they do. But it was also a way cheaper ingredient, right? So if you can get them fresh, and there's pretty good trade in the stuff at the time. There's enough corn going over there where I think you could not worry about being rancid. My speculation only. I mean, there was all the tax pressures too, right? I mean, so much of the British beer is tied to taxes, but using sugars because malt was taxed, and using corn because malt was taxed, and all that stuff.
And did you do a separate cereal mash, Andy?
So when the beer I was talking about, yes, but more recently, I discovered an enzyme called Ceramix, and so Ceramix will break down grains, adjuncts like corn, and other adjuncts, so that a separate cereal mash is not required. Ceramix, Ceremix. So you can just do a regular old mash. I mean, you can throw your corn in. You can throw in raw wheat if you want, and not have to do a cereal mash. So that's what I've been doing most recently. It's not that I don't. It's not that I don't enjoy doing a cereal mash, but on my particular setup, the last time I did one, it's hard to keep in my system. It's hard to keep the grits fully flowing and mixed in the system, and I always end up making a little bit of cornbread in the bottom of the like right under the dip tube is where where my spoon can't get to. I always end up with a big chunk of cornbread right there, which is a good snack. It's a good snack for the middle of the brew day.
Yeah.
Middle of the brew day, you need a snack.
What's the Korean dish that has like the the caramelized rice on the bottom of the stone bowl? Whatever. That's what it is. Anyway, so I don't know.
Trivia
I have trouble wrapping my head around what you're saying, because when I do a cereal mash, I'll just like you cook rice on a stove. If I'm making American light lager, I'll just cook up some rice, and then like you would cook rice, whatever, put water and rice and cook it for 20 minutes, and then I stir that into the mash.
Well, okay, so
so I'm not, and usually what I'll do is I'll start the mash. I'll put a couple spoonfuls of the mashed water in it just to degelatinize it, and then put it in. And like, I've never had a stuck anything with that. I mean, you don't even know it's there. It just blends in with the malt.
Yeah, I mean, now we're getting into details that I will probably bore everyone. But the reason, I mean, if I did the cereal mash like in a separate, reasonably sized kitchen pot and dumped it in, then it would probably be fine. But I was trying to do this low oxygen, and so I was transferring from vessel to vessel and trying to avoid, any kind of like turbulent flow or anything like that. So, yeah, arguably I should have just used a regular kitchen pot and done it, but because I'm trying to pump things around and do it low oxygen, that was what I ran into. And then, Ceramix, I discovered Ceramix, so I just started using that instead.
It's easy though, Andrew. You just fill your whole kitchen with, you can use CO2 or nitrogen, whatever. Just, sheet it
Whole
off.
kitchen.
Like just turn on the valve, let it go a couple hours, and then go in there with a mask and cook your rice.
I try not to enter the kitchen when brewing. It just never. I try to.
So
avoid that.
the big brewers, Budweiser and those guys, they don't do cereal mashes, right?
Yeah, they do.
Specific separate cereal mashes?
Yeah.
They do?
Yeah.
Huh.
I mean, I don't know anything. You're just.
I'll be real interested to see if they decide to switch to enzymes. In fact, I would be surprised if they haven't.
I didn't think they did, but I was going to say there is one brewery that I know definitely does, and that's Yunling. Yunling does separate cereal mashes with corn.
I mean, I think those big guys have been doing it that way forever. I would doubt they'd go to flaked or doubt they'd go to enzymes because they've already got all the capital tied up with the systems to be able to do a cereal mash. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew got to show off his book. I'll show off my Great British Beers and How to Make Them from the Durden Park Brewers Circle, copyright 1991. This is like the homebrew. There's like 200 recipes on like 50 pages. So it's like every recipe is like 4 lines long. But it's pretty fun to look at and gives you some perspective. You mix that with the Ron Patterson stuff, and it provides cool perspective, I think, from homebrewers, like 70s and 80s homebrewers, British homebrewer interpretation of what those things were like, and then Ron's like really digging into history and sort of triangulate the two, and it's, I think, good approach.
Who's the author on that book, Tom?
Yeah, so it's Dr. John Harrison and members of the Durden Park Beer Circle. So this is the London Homebrew Club, very famous. And this is the one that, who's the guy, Andrew, from South Africa who passed away?
Ant Hayes.
Ant Hayes.
Oh, Ant Hayes, man.
He was one of his big claim to fame. He's a South African, and he got into the Durden Park Brewers Circle, which is not an easy feat. You got to sort of be vetted for a number of years before you're admitted, kind of thing.
Wow.
I don't know the status of that group today, but that was, sort of the authority from a homebrew perspective for, probably a good 30 years, 70s, 80s, 90s.
Did they do Lodo?
British, man. You can't make British beers Lodo.
Exactly.
I didn't think so.
Definitely cannot.
You have to use half the malts to make British beers Lodo, huh?
And Andrew's over there frowning, but it's sort of true.
No, I'm in agreement. There's no way they did low oxygen brewing.
Yeah, but you're making British beers low oxygen. Yeah, see, he's not denying it.
It's true. I mean, there are parts of my low oxygen setup that I can't really not use. So it's not like I'm trying to.
English beers, huh?
I mean, yeah, I can't not use the mash cap because that's the way I return work to the mash tun. So like, I don't have another way of doing that. But yeah. I suppose I could not pre-deoxygenate the water and stuff. But
interesting.
Anyway, I put the link for the Ceramix enzyme in the chat. It's obviously expensive, but that amount that's like more than a lifetime supply for most people here. But if we were, if a lot of people are interested in adjunct brewing, then it might be something to go in on together.
Yeah, what's the expiration date on it? And do you have to keep it frozen, fridge?
No, it's about a year. You don't have to keep it frozen, but cold for about, and it lasts for about a year.
Hey, Andy, how'd you get a small quantity?
Well, they used to have small quantities on sale on their website, and I ordered some Ceramix and a couple of their other enzymes, and they sent me an email saying, "Oh, we don't actually have those really small quantities, so we're sending you we're sending you the 1.1 pounds or whatever. We're sending you the smallest we have for the same price. So I lucked out there.
You could convert all the starch in Indianapolis area.
Do one false move. Yeah, like I unscrew the cap of that. You got to be careful. Everybody's breakfast cereal could turn to mush.
Like Frank the bread guy.
Like a 5 mile radius.
What the hell? Like, never let Andrew in my house.
It's probably all over my clothes and everything.
Like anthrax. So how does it differ from amylase enzyme? It just is more potent, or works different protein?
Well, so the grains where you have to do a cereal mash, it's all about gelatinization temperature, right? Okay. So
lower.
You can't convert a starch until it's gelatinized. And for barley, the gelatinization temperature is around 150 degrees or less. Actually, this has been a pain point because the way crops have been, it's been steadily increasing over the years, which if anybody's been wondering why they've been getting like worse efficiency over the past 5 years, it's because of that agricultural issue. But for grains like corn and a lot of grains, actually, like they don't gelatinize until way higher, like boiling temperature or almost boiling temperature. And so you have to do a separate mash for those, mash where you like boil them, you cook them, like you cook rice or you cook oatmeal or what, like whatever you would normally boil, and then add it back to the mash so that then you can convert those starches. Otherwise they won't convert. They'll just sit there in the mash and do nothing. And so what this enzyme does is it gelatinizes those grains at at a not that much higher than room temperature, at mash temperature, basically. So you add it to your mash, and you just throw all those grains in there, and then they gelatinize and they convert just like barley would. So it's just
no effect on the other enzymes and barley and all that.
Well, it helps the barley convert because, as I said earlier, the barley, it's been harder and harder to gelatinize barley. Like if you used to mash, like say one of my favorite things to do was make an American lager and mash it at like 143 degrees for 3 hours. Well, that wouldn't work now because the barley that we're getting now doesn't gelatinize until like 148, 149. But if you had some of this, it would gelatinize that barley and you could convert it at the 143 again. I mean, theoretically, I haven't tried it, but that's the idea.
What's the problem with the barley and the temperature raising? Is this a global warming issue or
GMO?
I don't think it's GMO.
I don't know if anybody knows, right? But it's been creeping up, especially some years of crops are worse than others. Some regions are worse than others. I'm not a farmer nor a scientist nor play one on TV, but I have to think that maybe there's just modern agriculture and nitrogen and whatever component going on. Could just be weather too.
The German publication Brauwelt. If you can get access to Brauwelt, over the years they've had a number of articles talking about the increasing. It's a journal. It's the journal for commercial breweries mainly in Germany, and they've had a number of articles over the years talking about this. And I don't understand it myself. I don't understand the agricultural concepts behind it, and I'm, to be honest, not that interested. But I do think it has to do with, I want to say it has to do with rainfall. I think there have been differences in the amount of rainfall per year. I don't know if it's related to climate change or not, but But it's a trend for sure.
Perhaps now that the monolith has been removed, temperatures will swing back to what they used to be.
But they're removed?
It's going to be a much better year, too.
It's a political comedy he's making.
Topical.
So I think they made a documentary about this rising gelatinization temperature in crops. I think it was called like Interstellar or something like that.
There it is.
It had Matthew McConaughey in it, right?
Is that the one where basically none of the crops will grow? Like corn is like the last thing that'll grow on the planet. Am I thinking of the right movie?
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, that's Interstellar. Yeah.
I mean, we haven't seen the crop circles in a while. I mean, maybe they were helping, and now we don't have them. So,
Hey, Andy, got a question.
Yeah.
Spell that name of that Amazon you was talking about again.
Ceramix, Ceremix, and I posted a link to it in the chat.
Okay, I didn't catch that, but okay, I got it. When I typed in what I had, it come up with a turkey town, so.
No, I think you should probably follow that thread. I don't know where that was going, but it sounds interesting.
Hey, Martin, I got a question for you, getting back to the beer subject for the Scottish Ales tonight. Give me a rundown on that wee heavy that you drank tonight.
It's fine. I'm a little. Did you wash the bottle with tap water?
No, I washed the bottle with sanitizer.
There is a little bit of a phenol in there.
Okay. Get any dark fruit or maraschino cherry out of it?
There's some nice, interesting, deep flavors, but I'm not sure I picked up cherry.
Okay. No, just curious that, and going back to that cereal mash that Andy was talking about, I do a separate cereal mash on the Kentucky Common. I do once or twice a year, or in the last couple of years, 20 times a year. But anyway, I do a separate mash on it, but I take some of the barley that's been milled and add it to these 4 pounds of grits that I've used, and then cereal mash that. It kind of keeps it from becoming a stuck big hunk of mash in my induction pot. So it takes a while to bring it to a boil, but that's what I've been doing, and that's the reason why I'm interested in what Andy was talking about, is because if I can get rid of that 30-35 minutes of cereal mashing, I can shorten my brew day a little bit.
And if you buy some of that,
oh, Andy left. He's not there. I was going to talk to him.
He's getting probably a refill. Hey, I'll make a quick comment. Hey, Tom, you mentioned the Wee Heavy earlier. It reminded me I had brewed one for NHC back in February, and I had one last bottle left. I went and just poured when you made that. And it's
so much for the trade I was thinking about there for a second.
And to reference Linda, I was beer sampling Linda all summer, so I was giving her and her husband bottles of this. I think this Wee Heavy was one of his favorites. So, in toast to Rick, I want to raise my glass. So,
cheers to homebrew Wee Heavies.
Amen.
Rick.
Well, my Wee Heavy was also brewed for the NHC, and of course there wasn't any, so it was brewed in April. It's getting a little on the old side, but it's pretty doggone big, so I think it'll last.
Yeah, mine was 8.8, and I bottled it on 225, so it's quite an old beer. So it's sitting around for a while.
Mine's 9.7.
There you go. I knew you'd be bigger than me.
I call it brain inhibitor, like I need one.
Good for you.
Well, hey, Andy's still gone. I'll tell you guys, nothing definitive here at all, but there's Andy. He's back. Nothing definitive on this at all, but in looking at gelatinization properties of barley, are affected by growth temperature. Therefore, it is a global warming issue, perhaps. It's growing warmer, and the gelatinization temperature is increasing.
What? Why you got to get political, man?
Sorry. And this is this very old article that I just happened to find. I mean, this is going back 12 years ago. 2008 was a study on this.
How do I understand this? What does the gelatinization have to occur before beta amylase can begin to convert?
Yeah, and by the way, I was just talking about raw adjuncts, raw corn, like grits or raw rice, things like that. If you get flaked maize or that's why those flaked products exist. Those are pre-gelatinized. Right. So those you can just throw in the mash tun, they'll convert at the regular temperatures.
Yeah. Well, I have a question for you. So what if I go to the grocery store because I'm cheap and I buy like instant oatmeal or without the sugar, right? Or I buy
if it's rolled oats,
is that gelatinized or what?
Yeah. Rolled oats or instant oats. But if you buy like steel cut oats, don't expect those those are not gelatinized. You got to cook those, then throw them in the mash tun.
Okay. Thank you. I always learn something new.